tell, then you see the road. I'm out to my soul into the size whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fifth part of What If BEN10 Meets Jujutsu Kaisen. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Shinobi 360 on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The lava, which had now occupied all the corners of their surroundings, began to push and pull in a manner similar to water. "What is this place?" asked Ben. "This is domain expansion," explained Satoru. "Ow, hot. Hot, 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 hot," shouted a panicking Yuji as a small drop of lava brushed past his shoulder, causing Ben to look at him with worry. "You use cursed energy to construct an innate domain imbued with a cursed technique in your surroundings," said Satoru as he ignored Yuji's plight. "What you all experienced at the juvenile detention center was an incomplete domain that hadn't been imbued with any cursed techniques." Ben's eyes widened as Satoru recalled their last mission. "If that had been a proper domain, all of you first years would have died." I think Megumi understood that. By this point, Yuji had calmed down and also looked at Satoru attentively. "Spreading out a domain consumes a ton of energy, but its merits are worth the cost," said Satoru as he held up his left hand to his waist level. "One such benefit is the boost to stats due to environmental factors." "Oh. Like buffs in video games," said Yuji with excitement. "Another is," said Satoru as he looked to see a collection of rocks all piled together and sent towards them like a speeding bullet. With a gentle backhand motion with his left hand, Satoru immediately shattered the rocks. "Most sorcerers would have burned to ash the moment they entered my domain," thought Jogo as his eye was widened in disbelief. "That the techniques imbued in the domain are guaranteed to hit within that domain," said Satoru as he continued with his explanation as mild steam emanated from his left hand before he dropped it. "Guaranteed?" asked Yuji as he stood in front of Satoru. "Guaranteed," shouted Satoru as he looked at Yuji directly. "But don't worry. There are several ways to deal with it. You can take the hit using a curse technique, like just now, or," explained Satoru. "I don't really recommend this one, but you can go outside the domain. That's usually impossible. You can also. If I neutralize that infinity of yours with a dense domain, then my techniques will reach you," said Jogo, cutting off Satoru. "Yeah, they'll hit," said Satoru, still smiling. "Huh? Infinity?" asked Yuji as he crossed his arms. Another recollection of a memory came to Jogo's mind. This one involved him standing in front of a table that was styled in a manner similar to that of a restaurant. Behind Jogo, who held a sinister grin, was 3 corpses laid across the table and chairs burning. "Give me the prison realm. I'll add it to my collection," said Jogo in the memory. "I came here half in jest. I thought I wouldn't care if I couldn't kill him," thought Jogo, his mind now focused on his present predicament. "But having this difference between us move in my face," Jogo then began to recollect his battle with Satoru, and grit his teeth with frustration as he remembered how thoroughly outclassed he was in their fight. "On my pride as a cursed spirit, as the new humanity, this is completely unacceptable," declared Jogo. "The most effective way to deal with a domain," began Satoru as he slowly raised his right hand until it was directly in front of his face, "is to lay out your own domain." Satoru proceeded to gently grab his BLNDFLD with his right index finger and middle finger respectively. When 2 domains are laid out at the same time, the more refined one will dominate that space. Slowly, he began to peel off the BLNDFLD, revealing an eyebrow in the process. Though, sometimes, compatibility and the amount of cursed energy are factors. Satoru had managed to bring the BEN10 down to the front of his nose. "There won't even be ashes left of you, Gojosatoru," shouted Jogo as he took a step forward with his left leg. Upon doing so, the ground in front of him gave way, and a wave of lava began to rush towards the trio. Before it could make contact with them, it stopped in its tracks, as if suspended in motion due to time. Yuji and Ben groaned due to the heat that emanated from the closeness of the lava. Satoru, however, had successfully pulled his BEN10 down to the level of his mouth. "Domain expansion," said Satoru as he dropped his BEN10 even further until it was wrapped around his neck, though he still held onto it. His appearance had changed slightly but significantly due to the now discarded BEN10. His hair was now in bangs, covering the top of his ears. His eyes, which were now exposed, was initially closed. But upon opening, it could be seen that they had an alluring blue color to them, which complemented his mesmerizing face nicely. "Infinite void," said Satoru as he raised up his left hand before crossing his left middle finger behind his left index finger. Immediately, the surrounding area became pure white, leaving Ben, Yuji and Jogo in surprise as neither the lava or the walls were in sight. Their surroundings would change once more. This time to a black color filled with numerous streamlined colors akin to that of a rainbow. Ranging from red, purple, pink and neon. Jogo stood in front of the trio like a statue, as he was unable to move. The look of complete shock and confusion complemented the stance he took nicely, as he too held up his left hand with his middle finger crossed behind his index finger. Whereas Satoru's stance showcased confidence and composure, Jogo's stance showcased confusion and an apparent struggle to compute the events around him. It would be quite ironic, as what Jogo's eye was being subjected to at that very moment was far beyond his comprehension. Firstly, Jogo saw what looked like a tree from two different mirrored views that were completely in black and white. Secondly, he saw what looked like a large, faint green nucleus in a black background. Inside the nucleus was a very small and black ball. Thirdly, he saw millions upon millions of white cells all within a black environment. Then, his perception of his surroundings changed back to the mixture of colors, only for it to immediately change into a new surrounding. This one was completely black, and floating in front of him was what seemed like a giant human eyeball. The scara, however, was a gray texture mixed with other faint but notable colors. The pupil, though black, seemed more in line with a black hole. Suddenly, multiple stripes of white and black appeared from all corners of this new environment, as if it was a paper smeared with ink. "What just happened?" thought Jogo as he still remained motionless. "Was my domain overwhelmed? I can't see anything. I can't feel anything." Jogo's single pupil began to shake as he saw what looked a small mirror reflection of himself inside the gigantic black pupil. No, Jogo then appeared inside of the pupil, with his surrounding environment still remaining the same as when he was outside it. "I can see everything. I can feel everything. But the information is never complete. So I can't do anything." Both Jogo and the world around began to have a desaturated gray color scheme. Before the coloring could change any further, Satoru's left hand suddenly placed itself on top of Jogo's head. "This is the inner world of Limitless," explained Satoru as he did in fact stand behind a still motionless Jogo. He held Yuji around his right hand, and Ben by the back of his shirt with the same hand, thus leaving the brunette teen to nearly touch the non-existent floor. Perception, communication. Every action involved in living is forcibly carried out an infinite number of times. Though the white and black smears still remained, the primary color of the world around them was blue. "It's ironic, isn't it?" said Satoru while smiling. "When granted everything, you can't do anything but just die peacefully." Both Ben and Yuji looked up at Satoru with disbelief, a drop sweat even forming on Yuji's right cheek. "But I have questions I want to ask you, so I'm letting you off the hook with this," said Satoru before he began to tug firmly at Jogo's head. With a broad smile that served to unsettle the teens even further, Satoru looked at Jogo as his head began to stretch due to the strain it was being put under by being pulled on by Satoru. A rather loud snap was heard as Jogo's head was ripped clean off by Satoru. Purple blood began to gush out like a fountain at the hole where Jogo's head once rested on. Its actual color wasn't what was shown, however, as the world around them became black and white, including themselves and Jogo's blood. The only other color that existed was a blood red smear plastered horizontally around the sections of white in the world. In the real world, a rather large silver ball floating above the water could be seen for a few moments before it shined a bright, ultraviolet light and shattered like glass. Jogo's head was thrown towards the grass, and began to roll across it before eventually stopping, with it being rested sideways. A look of disbelief could be seen on Jogo's face. Then, a foot could be seen placed on the exposed side of Jogo's head, causing his single eye to look up in order to discern the owner. "Now, who told you to come after me?" said Satoru, whose left foot was the one that was stepping on Jogo. He had put back on his BLNDFLD, but he held it up with his right hand, thus revealing his right eye. Ben and Yuji stood behind as they looked on with disbelief. "He really is the strongest jujutsu sorcerer," thought Yuji. "As a living organism, he's on another level." Satoru had a rather cold expression from just his single eye that was exposed. If I ever had any doubts about Gojo being the strongest, he just threw them all out the window, thought Ben. Far away from the four, atop a mountain were two unique individuals who watched the current events unfold. The first, who sat on the ground with his hands on his knees, was tall, slim man with long black hair partially tied up behind his head while the rest drapes down his back. He had small black eyes and bangs that occasionally cover the left eye. His earlobes were large enough to fit fairly large circular earrings. He sported a gold-colored kasaya garment over black yukata robes. His monk attire is completed with white tabi socks and zora sandals. The second, who stood, was a cursed spirit. It was large and tanned, cursed with black lines running across its entire body. It had a helmet-like head that didn't cover its teeth, branches for where the eyes are supposed to be, and two black lines that zigzagged down its face. It had a white cloth wrapped its left arm in a manner similar to a bandage. It also wore black baggy pants that was held up with a white sash. "Oh, dear," said the human with a tone of amusement instead of worry. "What now?" said the human, as he continued to make jest of Jogo's situation. The cursed spirit, however, raised up its left index. "Will you rescue him?" A white dandelion formed on its finger. "I can't let people from the school see my face, so I'll be going home now," said the human with a smirk before getting up. Before walking away, he turned his back on the cursed spirit. "If you want to save him, go ahead and save him," said the human, as if taunting the cursed spirit. "Though I don't know if your kind have such emotions." With that, he began to walk away. "We do. We're the true humans after all," said the cursed spirit before vanishing in the blink of an eye. "Quite the statement for a cursed spirit to make," said the human with a sinister smirk. Back on the ground, Satoru continued with his interrogation of Jogo, rolling his head back and forth ever so slightly. "You don't seem like the type to act on orders," said Satoru. "Was something good supposed to happen if you killed me?" asked Satoru, making jest of Jogo's plight. "Regardless, I want to know. Who was it?" said Satoru with his tone suddenly shifting to a more serious one. "Come on, just tell me already," said Satoru with playful annoyance as he began to slowly apply pressure on Jogo's head. "Like I'd ever tell you, brat," said Jogo defiantly. "You sure you should be saying that?" asked Satoru in a teasing manner as he applied more pressure to Jogo's head. "DMNU," cursed Jogo. "Hurry up and tell me or I'll exorcise you," said Satoru in a teasing manner once more. "Of course, I'll do it either way," said Satoru in a more sincere manner. "Wait, curses are capable of holding conversations, it seemed so normal, I overlooked it," asked a confused Yuji. Yeah, it crossed my mind too now that I think about it, said a curious Ben. Raising his head slightly, Satoru gasped in shock as an object landed in between him and Jogo. It had a shape similar to the bottom of a tree bark, but was slim. It had a large, white dandelion flower on top of it. As both Ben, Yuji, and Jogo gasped in shock upon seeing the tree root, the ground below the root began to rapidly spurt out different types of flowers until it completely enveloped the area. As a result, the perception of reality of all four individuals turned into a pink background with flower petals constantly falling. Ben, Yuji, and Satoru all had faint blushes on their cheeks as they smiled happily with their eyes closed and their mouths slightly opened. Wow! Said Satoru in awe. Flowers! Said Ben and Yuji in unison. Pretty! Said Satoru in agreement. Jogo, whose mouth was stuffed with flowers, was struggling to speak. Satoru, still sporting a smile, would eventually change his expression to one of confusion. Upon doing so, he would lightly slap himself on the face with left hand, thus snapping himself back to reality. That is a curse, right? It's stripping away my will to fight, theorized Satoru. Ben and Yuji, who were still under dream effect, would be pulled out of their trance by Yuji suddenly being lifted up to the sky from upside down by a large brown vine. Both Ben and Satoru would gasp audibly as they witnessed Yuji's plight. While they were distracted, the cursed spirit would immediately pick up Jogo's head with its right hand before running away. Itadori! Shouted Ben with worry. Hang on, I'll get you down safely. Ben brought his left hand, which was clenched, into a fist backwards, and his right hand, which was also clenched, into a fist forward. Upon doing so, the pink aura would manifest itself on his hands once again. But they would end vanishing as soon as they appeared, causing Ben's eyes to widen in surprise. Huh? Why can't I use my powers? Asked Ben to no one in particular as he looked at his hands. You guys, I'll be fine. Go after him, said Yuji in an attempt to reassure the both of them. He would end up failing to do so, because as soon as he was raised high into the air as much as the vine would go, he was brought back down rapidly. Oh no! Said Ben with a low tone of dismay. Immediately, he pushed back his left sleeve with his right hand, and cupped said hand around the now exposed omnitrix. From the ground where the vine emerged sprung out its source. A cursed spirit in the form of a tree bark that had no eyes, but a rather wide mouth with fangs colored the same as its body. Several tree branches were plastered across all corners of its body, and atop its head were several large vines as well. Sorry, I lied, help! Shouted a frightened Yuji as he was a few seconds away from being eaten. Almost immediately, the vines all fell as if they were sliced by the air itself, and the cursed spirit was immediately engulfed in flames. Satoru faced the exorcised curse with his hands crossed, indicating that he was the one who attacked. He then turned back while taking a battle stance, leaving Yuji to scream as he began to fall. Luckily for him, Ben caught Yuji in his hands bridal style. You alright? Ben asked a confused Yuji. Nodding slightly in confirmation, Yuji was then placed gently on the ground by Ben. Wow! Thought Satoru with a grin as he stood upright. He got away. He's good at hiding his presence. He's way creepier than Volcano Head. Yuji then fell on his knees gently, before lowering his head to the ground, and placing his hands on it as well. Itadori? Said Ben in confusion as he was taken aback by Yuji's display. I'm sorry about that. Apologized Yuji as he stretched out his left hand. So cursed spirits of that level are forming a faction now? Said Satoru to no one in particular as he cupped his chin with his left hand and a smile on his face. They managed to escape because of me. Though you're the one who brought me here, right? Unbeknownst to Yuji, his apology was being completely ignored. This is getting interesting, said Satoru with childlike glee. He's completely ignoring him, thought Ben with a frown. Yuji, Tennyson. said Satoru as he looked back at both teens. I want you both, or rather everyone, to become strong enough to beat that. Whereas Ben's reaction was more of a subdued feeling of surprise, Yuji's was more evident. Huh? Beat that? Asked Yuji in disbelief as he thought of Jogo. It's better to have a concrete goal, right? Said Satoru as he waved his left index finger side to side. Man, I'm glad I brought you both here. Said Satoru with childlike excitement as he raised his head up slightly. I had no idea what was going on, though. Are you serious? Yuji deadpanned. Me either. And unfortunately, I think he is. Ben deadpanned as well. Now that we've set your goal, all that's left is to pursue it. Said Satoru before putting his left hand back in his pocket. We'll speed up the schedule a bit. For the next month, Yuji, you'll be watching movies and fighting me. Said Satoru as he pointed at Yuji with his left index finger. Tennyson, you'll also be fighting me, but we'll focus on getting a better grip on your new powers. Said Satoru as he pointed at Ben as well. He then clenched his right hand into a fist and placed it inside his left palm. Fighting you? Asked Yuji in disbelief. Will I still be alive a month from now? Said Yuji as he crossed his arms with a somber expression on his face. You'll be fine. Encouraged Ben with a smile as he wrapped his left hand around Yuji's shoulders. Yuji then let out a small smile in response. After all, it's practical combat. Said Satoru before dropping both hands. You'll take on and complete several harder missions. Said Satoru as he raised up his right hand. You'll learn the basics and how to apply them. Said Satoru as he brought out his right index finger and middle finger with each sentence he said. And then you'll show them off at the exchange event. Said Satoru as he dropped his right hand before raising it back up and wide with his left hand. Hey, sensei! Shouted Yuji as he raised up his left. Yes, Yuji! Shouted Satoru as he pointed at Yuji with his right index finger. What's the exchange event? Said Yuji with embarrassment that was only masked by his smile. Satoru also sported a smile of his own, one that was of disbelief. He looked at Yuji, before looking at Ben. Don't look at me like that, I don't what it is either. Said Ben in self-defense as he crossed his hands. I didn't tell either of you. Said Satoru still smiling. Nope. Replied Ben. The setting is a small Japanese-styled hut with light illuminating the windows. Inside it was Principal Yaga, who had a stern look on his face as he crossed his arms and legs while sitting down on a chair with no legs. Sitting in front of him with his hands placed on his knees was a very nervous Kiyotaka. He was sweating profusely due to the intense glare he was subjected to by Yaga, which caused him to look to his side. Both men then looked at the brown but low wooden table in between them. He's late! Shouted Yaga, causing Kiyotaka to gasp in fear. The setting was the hallway of a building that had several doors, and was dimly lit. Walking by with his hands crossed was the human from earlier. Coming to a stop in front of a black door, the man held it by the handle with his right hand, before proceeding to open it. Upon doing so, he walked inside the seemingly pitch-black room. The setting changed once again to daytime, and the environment was that of a beach. Appearing from the other side of the door before closing it, the man, while walking forward, looked at the ocean. Coming to a stop, the man looked through the corner of his left eye at what seemed to be a red octopus within the water whose eyes and a small portion of its head were the only things that were visible. Sure is peaceful here, said the man. Placed a few feet away from him was an umbrella that shielded a beach chair from the harsh rays of the sun. Sitting on said chair was a rather unusual individual who held a brown book in his hand. Though he had an appearance of a tall human male, the patchwork on his face made him give off a rather unusual vibe. This was further complemented by his heterochromatic eyes, with his left eye being dark blue and his right eye being gray. He had long grayish-blue hair that reached past his neck and is sectioned off into 3 large strands with ties at the ends. Along with his face, he had stitches all across his body that give him the appearance that he was sewn together. He also sported a black shawl that is separated into 3 pieces on the left sleeve. He also wore matching pants but was without shoes. "How's Jogo doing, Geto?" asked the man as he flipped a page on his book. "On death's door," said the other man, now revealed to be Geto, as he walked towards him. Hanami stepped in to save him, so he'll probably be fine. By now, Geto stood by the side of the patchworked man. "How irresponsible. You're the one who egged him on," said the man. "Heavens, no," argued Geto. "I tried to stop him." Geto then began to look around as if in search of someone. "Where's Michael?" asked Geto. "He's been gone for a while, said he needed to feed," said the patchworked man as he flipped another page of his book. "Does he actually need to feed, or is he just avoiding us again?" said Geto with a sly smile. "Who knows with him?" said the man with a smile of his own. Geto then turned back, and saw the cursed spirit, revealed to be Hanami, standing in front of the closed door and holding Jogo's head in his right hand. "Speak of the devil. At least 2 of them," said Geto, before facing them fully. "Jogo, Hanami. Glad to see you're safe," said the man with a smile. "How can you say that when you see me like this?" asked Jogo, obviously annoyed. "You're lucky you got off with just that," taunted Geto, causing Jogo's single eye to widen. Geto then held up his hands and stuck his tongue playfully in response. "Why, you," threatened Jogo. "I think you understand now," began Geto. "So we'll go about sealing Gojosatoru at the appropriate time, in the appropriate place, once we've secured our advantage over him. We'll carry it out on October 31st and I'll contact you with more details later," said Geto with a smile as he looked towards the ocean. "Good enough, Mahito?" asked Geto as he looked at the patchworked man, now revealed to be Mahito with a playful smile. "No objections here," said Mahito as he closed his book and placed it in between his laps. His head was lowered, and his eyes were covered by his hair. "Let's be cunning about this. Like curses should," said Mahito as he raised his head up and opened his eyes. "Like humans should," said Mahito before letting out a light chuckle as he revealed himself to be a curse. The past few days had proved to be quite daunting for Ben. No moment expressed his growing frustration better than his current predicament. It was midnight, and rays of light courtesy of the full moon instilled a sense of peace and tranquility around the city. While most people were in the comforts of their homes, sleeping in anticipation of the upcoming morning, Ben was still wide awake. Standing several feet away from a tree at the park Satoru brought him to some days back, Ben could be seen wearing a different set of clothes from his normal attire. Though he wore his signature black t-shirt, he also wore gray, ankle-length pants. His footwear was a pair of wooden sandals in place of his signature black and white sneakers. The omnitrix could be seen in all its glory, occupying a good portion of his left hand. Repeatedly panting due to exhaustion, sweat could be seen dripping off of Ben's forehead to his cheeks, and his hands. Despite this, the look of resolution in his eyes seemed absolute. Ceasing his panting and clenching his fists, Ben manifested his mana through the familiar pink aura. Unclenching his right hand, Ben would then swing it forward as if throwing an object. Ben's eyes widened as he looked at the tree, as if he had expected something to happen to it. He then held up his right hand, and to his shock, the pink aura dispersed. However, it would reappear in a manner akin to a flicker. Clenching his right fist tightly, Ben then swung his left hand forward in the same manner he did his right, but to his dismay, was met with the same result. Gritting his teeth, he would begin to alternate between throwing his left hand and right hand forward. Despite still being met with the same outcome, Ben would be proved to be unrelenting in his actions, evident by the short but loud battle cries he would let out each time he threw a hand forward. Unfortunately, several minutes would pass, and the result would remain unchanged. After throwing his hands forward in evident frustration a few more times, Ben would let out a loud groan of annoyance before falling on his knees. Now knelt on the ground, Ben would then fall on his back by his left side, and stretch out his arms and legs. He had reached his limit, both physically and mentally. Sighing out of exhaustion, Ben's breathing would maintain a steady pace as he no longer engaged himself in his strenuous training. With the soothing breeze of the night sky washing over his body, specifically his face, Ben's mind began to recollect the events that led to his current training. Flashback. It was 2 hours before midnight, and it was the night in which Ben, Yuji and Satoru encountered the two cursed spirits, Jogo and Hanami. Satoru had gone to meet Yaga as he initially planned. Yuji was in the sitting room continuing his movie marathon. Ben had politely declined his request to watch with him, as he had something else he wanted to do. In a room, sitting on the edge of the bottom bed of a double bunk was Ben, holding a plumber's badge in his right hand with a smile. He wore his black t-shirt and gray shorts, but didn't wear any footwear whatsoever. Considering the events of the day that was gradually reaching its end, Ben saw it necessary to reach out to someone of importance to him. As he activated the plumber's badge, the hologram of his cousin, Gwen, appeared. She wore a pink, sleeveless, nightwear sleep shirt and a nightwear sleep shorts of the same color. Her hair was untied from her ponytail, and as such, it fell down to her back. "How's my favorite cousin?" asked Ben with a warm smile. She was just about to turn in for the night until her doofus cousin asked her to stay awake for the next hour. Said Gwen as she crossed her hands in annoyance. "I already apologized about that, but you can't deny that you're not actually miffed to talk to me." Ben's expression changed into a sly grin once he noticed the look of hesitation in Gwen's eyes. "True," admitted Gwen with a bemused smile, causing Ben to slightly snicker. "So, how did your day go?" asked Ben. "Same as always for the most part. Nothing really eventful has happened since you left," said Gwen with a shrug. "Yeah, you did say that," said Ben, slightly trailing off. "And you find that hard to believe?" said Gwen, noticing Ben's slight hesitation. Deciding to be honest with her, Ben sighed in response. "Of course I do. From what you've told me, I've been gone for the better part of a month. The fact that no bad guys have tried to take over the world, destroy it or even threaten other planets since then is pretty jarring to me." The worry in Ben's tone, though understandable, did make Gwen slightly nervous as she wished not to add to his worries. "There have been bad guys," reassured Gwen. "C or D rank villains don't count, Gwen," said Ben with a scoff, not pleased by her placing the likes of Serpent as a legitimate threat. "All right," said Gwen as she held up her hands in defeat. "But I'm serious though, things have been pretty mellow since you left. Nothing out of our control has sprung up, and since it's us we're talking about, myself, Kevin and Grandpa Max, nothing ever will." Though wary at first, the sincerity and confidence in Gwen's voice followed by the warmth of her smile did help to ease an already tensed Ben. "I guess you're right," said Ben with a sigh. "I'm just worried, that's all." Ben's smile, though small, was sincere as well. "Which is completely understandable," said Gwen in understanding. "Earth's greatest hero is currently MIA. It's only right that he hopes nothing bad happens while he's away." She then placed her hands on her waist and sported a smirk. She knew the boost those words would give to Ben's ego. "True," said Ben, trying to contain a snicker but failing as his face lighted up a bit. "Not that I don't appreciate you checking up on us, but I'm pretty sure you could have done so earlier," said Gwen casually. "Yeah, sorry about that again. But it's just like I said, it's pretty important," said Ben apologetically. "No duh, considering what time it is," said Gwen as she rolled her eyes before smirking once more. "Did anything unusual happen in your day?" she asked. "Oh, you have no idea," said Ben with a smirk of his own. "Oh. Do tell," said Gwen as she leaned her head forward slightly, indicating that Ben had piqued her curiosity. Well, for starters, the most interesting thing about today happened earlier on. And since telling you about it right now would more or less make it the only thing we'll talk about this night, I'll shelve it for later," said Ben, causing Gwen to briefly blink in confusion. "Okay, if you say so," said Gwen as she regained her composure. "Don't worry, the next thing is pretty interesting in its own right," assured Ben with a small smile. "Which would be?" asked Gwen. "Itadori and encountered another special grade today," said Ben, causing Gwen's eyes to widen. "You did? Didn't you guys fight one just 2 days ago?" asked Gwen in surprise. "Yeah, we did," said Ben as his tone became slightly more serious. "But Gwen, this one was completely different from the one we fought in the detention center." Though she had an immediate question formed in her mind from that sentence, Gwen chose to allow Ben to continue talking. "Heck, we didn't even fight it, but just from the little we saw of what it could do, it was much stronger than the last one," reminisced Ben. "How strong are we talking?" asked Gwen, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Even though I don't have any exact specifics, I can confidently say a lot." Gwen looked at Ben in confusion, thus needing him to elaborate further. "Gwen, it was probably stronger than Sukuna is right now." Gwen's eyes and mouth widened in shock. The tone of Ben's voice suggested he was being sincere, and even then she found it hard to believe. Ben had told her much about his experiences in the new world from when they first spoke. And though they were things she wished he explained better, she believed him wholeheartedly when he cited Sukuna as the ceiling of power to the foes he now fought regularly. Though it took a bit of convincing. To hear that they existed being stronger than Sukuna in his weakened state wasn't what surprised her completely, but more of the fact that Ben would encounter one of them so soon. "That strong? How could," began Gwen only to cut herself off. "Wait a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself a bit," said Gwen as she composed herself from her initial shock. "You said you didn't have to fight it. How come?" asked Gwen. "That's because Gojo fought it instead," answered Ben. "Really?" said Gwen in surprise. From what Ben told her, he had never seen Satoru fight before, but he suspected that he was strong. So for him to have engaged the cursed spirit in combat was further evidence of its strength. "Yeah. And Gwen?" said Ben, cutting off Gwen from her train of thought. "Yeah," said Gwen. "Remember when I told you that Gojo called himself the strongest?" said Ben. "You said he was probably being cocky but that he's probably strong in his own right," said Gwen with an amused smile. "Yeah, I take all of that back," said Ben in confirmation. "Huh? Why the sudden change of heart?" said Gwen as her amused smile was more apparent. "That's because he really is the strongest," said Ben in awe. Whoa, time out for a bit," said Gwen as she waved both hands around before stopping. "Are we talking about the same guy? Doesn't take anything seriously? Get on your nerves with how carefree and cocky he is?" asked Gwen in disbelief. "Which might I add is pretty ironic coming from you." She then crossed her hands as a mischievous smirk formed on her face. "Ha ha," said Ben mockingly, not amused by Gwen's jab at his ego. "But that's besides the point. Are you sure you aren't exaggerating?" asked Gwen in a more sincere tone. "Gwen, to put this into perspective, the only reason why Itadori and I even met this special grade was because Gojo brought us to where it was," began Ben. "He was fighting it earlier, and it looked pretty beat up when we saw it. While he on the other hand didn't have so much as a scratch on him." The astonishment in Ben's voice wasn't lost on Gwen, but she wondered if it was fully justified. She wouldn't question her cousin however, as she was certain that she'd find out for herself if he continued. "Heck, he ticked it off so much that it basically tried to kill all three of us, even when I could tell that it had its reservations once it saw us." Ben began to recollect the expression on Jogo's face once he and Yuji burst onto the scene. Though Jogo's attention was directed towards Satoru for most of the fight, when it was directed towards the two teens, Ben could practically see his hesitation in harming them. A display that made Ben suspect that perhaps Jogo was interested in himself and Yuji in some way. If only he knew just how right he was. Gojo made sure we didn't get hurt just by standing there. And that's not even the craziest part. A single eyebrow was raised in confusion by Gwen due to Ben's claim. The special grade trapped us in some kind of alternate reality that it and Gojo called a domain expansion. Explained Ben. What's that? Asked Gwen, not familiar with the term in any way. It's a lot more detailed than what I'm about to say, but I'm sticking with it to keep things simple. It's a move that basically guarantees you an instant win if you're able to pull it off, and only the strongest sorcerers or cursed spirits can do it. Though she felt that his explanation could have been more effective, Gwen couldn't deny that it did its job in instilling a sense of shock in her. Gojo got us out of it by using his own domain expansion, and it basically left the special grade frozen in place. Said Ben. The way you're saying all this makes it sound like Gojo pulled this off effortlessly. Observed Gwen. That's because he did. Said Ben with a flat tone. And the only reason why it got away was because Gojo wanted to find out why it attacked him before exorcising it. That and another special grade blindsided us to save it. A small frown formed on Ben's face as he remembered how Hanami nearly hurt Yuji. It disappeared almost immediately as he also remembered that despite Hanami and Jogo's escape, Yuji was safe. Whoa. That sounds pretty intense. And the fact that neither you or Itadori got hurt in any way, said Gwen in astonishment. Goes to show how tough Gojo really is. Acknowledged Ben. You never actually told me what Gojo's powers are. Apart from him having limited teleportation, and being to push back or crush objects by using cursed energy or cursed techniques. Gwen pointed out. Well, that's because I didn't actually know them all myself. Gojo always gave off the impression that he has more powers than he lets on. Even today, I still feel that way. Said Ben sincerely. Must be quite the arsenal he has if he's keeping it vague on purpose. Said Gwen with her right hand cupped under her chin. Yeah. But luckily I was able to get him to explain to me the powers he's used so far before he left to meet Principal Yaga. Said Ben with a small smile. Really? What did he tell you? Asked Gwen with a tone that somewhat concealed her curiosity. Gwen, I need you to make me a promise. Said Ben with a straight face. What for? Asked a perplexed Gwen. Gojo's powers are unlike anything we've ever seen before. At least when you consider how little stuff he has to complement it, but yet it still stands out. Began Ben. And it's because they're so unique, that I'm going to deliberately not tell you everything about them. Gwen's eyes blinked twice in disbelief as she was floored by Ben's statement. What? Why? Asked Gwen as she somewhat regained her composure. Gwen, you're going to geek out if I did. And I'm trying to avoid that so that I can tell you the most important thing that happened today. Explained Ben. Began Gwen. And even then, with the little I'm going to tell you, you're still going to geek out. That's why I'm asking you to promise me to at the very least, try not to do that until I tell you the other thing that happened today. Said Ben, cutting her off. His tone highlighted complete belief in what he had just said, as he knew the bounds of his cousin's curiosity all too well, and the lengths she would go to satisfy them. Fortunately, she knew them too, as though she remained speechless with a frown on her face, she was in fact, contemplating Ben's words. She knew that they rang through, and as such, knew that the best choice would be to oblige. Go on. Said Gwen with a sigh. Thank you. Said Ben sincerely, though the smirk on his face caused Gwen to roll her eyes. So let's start off on how Gojo made sure Itadori and I weren't hurt. He has this ability called Infinity. Basically, it allows him to manipulate space. And when you see him use it, it's not actually what you think he's doing that he's doing. Explained Ben. I don't follow. Said Gwen. When I first saw Gojo use Infinity, I thought his powers were based on telekinesis. But it's actually much cooler than that," said Ben with a tone of enthusiasm and a smile to boot. "What it does is essentially create an infinite number of space between himself and whatever's trying to make contact with him. That way, said thing seems either frozen in place or like it's hit a wall," said Ben, recollecting how Satoru was able to stop the water or the attacks of Jogo's domain from touching them. And his second ability, domain expansion. Each domain expansion is unique, and his is called Infinite Void. Began Ben. What this one does is basically feeds your brain with so much info that you can't even do anything or think to do anything. You're just left frozen. Is he really that powerful? Asked Gwen in astonishment. Yeah. Pretty crazy, isn't it? Especially when you consider that it's probably not even all he can do, said Ben with a chuckle. Which makes me all the more relieved that despite how much I rag on him for being irresponsible about certain things, he's ultimately a good guy. Or at the very least, on our side. Said Ben with a sincere smile as he basically admitted, albeit begrudgingly, that despite his flaws, Satoru was okay in his book. While we're on strength, Gojo did say that he wants to train Itadori and I to a level where we can beat special grades like the ones we met with ease. Said Ben as he realized that the appropriate time was now. Sounds like a pretty daunting task, said Gwen with mild concern. At first, yeah. But Itadori's pretty strong in his right, and he's only going to get stronger by the day. And though I'm already spoken for in terms of power, I think my odds of getting stronger, with a smirk, Ben brought out his left hand and clenched it into a fist. Are even better, the familiar pink aura engulfed it, causing Gwen to audibly gasp, even going as far as to cover her mouth with both hands. Ben? Said Gwen, not believing her eyes. Surprise, Gwen. Hope it was worth the wait. Said Ben with a snicker, but a sincere smile. Aye, is that? Gwen proceeded to drop her hands slowly, her disbelief very much apparent. Yep, mana. Answered Ben as he unclenched his left hand, causing his mana to disperse. Ben, why didn't you tell me sooner? This is huge, said Gwen as her tone now harbored at barely containable excitement. Because I knew you wouldn't be able to hide your excitement, said Ben, his smile becoming slightly wider. Of course I wouldn't, this is great. We already knew from Ultimate Ben that you could learn how to use mana in the future. But to be able to do so this soon, said Gwen, making no efforts whatsoever to hide her excitement anymore. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it too, admitted Ben sheepishly. It's a pleasant surprise, no doubt, being able to have these powers at all. But I really haven't been as excited about it as I know I normally would. Ben's expression became slightly downcast, and somewhat somber. Huh? Why? Asked a confused Gwen, as she was taken aback by Ben's sudden expression change. You're normally excited to jump at the chance to learn about new powers, Gwen mentioned as Ben's smile had all but faded. It's a bit different this time, Gwen, said Ben, in an effort to force a smile, only for it to drop as fast as it began to form. How? Asked a worried Gwen. Ultimate Ben did say that he was able to use mana after hanging around his version of Gwen for over 20 years. Began Ben. Yes, under normal circumstances, I'd be more excited about learning about these powers, especially after getting them much earlier than I thought. But I can't help but feel the timing's a bit cynical. Ben lowered his head a bit before looking back at Gwen, as if bracing himself for what he wanted to say next. What do you? Asked Gwen. They remind me far too much of home, Gwen, said Ben, cutting her off. How neither of us know how long I have to stay here before I can get back. And though my time here's been short, for the most part, it has been fine, said Ben with a tone of bitterness as he looked even more downcast. But then his expression lightened up slightly, and a small smile formed on his face, as if a pleasant memory just came to the forefront of his mind. I'm glad to have met Itadori, Fushiguro, Kujisaki and even Gojo. But I wish I didn't have to meet them at the cost of getting separated from you guys again. Said Ben genuinely, as he had gradually come to cherish his time with his new allies, and genuinely looked forward to what the future held for them. But wished that it didn't seemingly come at the cost of his friends and family. Ben, began Gwen with sympathy. You don't have to beat yourself up for what happened, it wasn't your fault. Ben looked away to the side before looking back at Gwen, as if bracing himself to question her. Isn't it? If I had just been able to tell that the ultimates were alive each time I used them, I could have worked towards setting them free. Then they wouldn't have to lash out, and I wouldn't have found myself in this mess. Argued Ben, as the cause of his despair was now out in the open. Ben, you possibly couldn't have known that. Countered Gwen. All the times you used the ultimates, you were you and no one else. Even Azimuth doesn't blame you for what happened. Said Gwen sincerely. Azimuth? What did he say? Asked Ben, his expression now that of utmost curiosity. It was a glitch in the Ultimatrix that caused the ultimates to come to life. That's not your fault, but rather as a result of how the Ultimatrix was made. Explained Gwen. Not to mention that you were brought by a time traveler like Paradox. Ben's eyes widened slightly before narrowing once again, as he just came to a realization. Oh, can't believe I overlooked that. Said Ben with embarrassment. I know this is hard for you, Ben. It is for us too. But we need to be there for each other, now more than ever. And if we can do that, we will get through this, no matter how hard it may seem at first. Encouraged Gwen. Also, I don't think your mana abilities have to be a painful reminder that you're not here with us. It will be that way if you let it. Gwen then held up both her hands, which were clenched into fists. Upon doing so, the familiar pink aura formed on both of them, with even more brightness than Ben's. Rather, I think it's a sign that no matter how far apart we may be from each other, or whatever problems you may face, began Gwen. Uncle Carl, Aunt Sandra, my parents, Kevin, Grandpa Max and me. We'll always be with you and we'll always be there for you, whenever you need us the most. The sincerity in Gwen's voice and warmth of her smile was all that Ben needed to put his insecurities to rest. Though Yuji did well to lessen them, Gwen absolutely cleared them. Thank you, Gwen. It means a lot to me. Said Ben with a smile that showed gratitude, and a tone to match. Anytime. Said Gwen with her warm smile still present as she unclenched her fists and dropped her hands, causing the pink aura to disperse. It's getting pretty late. We should probably turn in for the night. Said Gwen. Yeah, you're right. Said Ben in agreement. Though before I go, I have a few things to say about your new powers. Said Gwen. I'll try my best to make time throughout each day to help you use them better. Suggested Gwen, causing Ben to briefly blink in surprise. You sure? I really appreciate the offer, but I wouldn't want to ask too much of you. Asked Ben, slightly taken aback. It's nothing really, so don't worry about it. Assured Gwen. Besides, I'm pretty sure you'd need my help either way, even if it was later down the line. Said Gwen with a sly smile. You don't see me arguing. Said Ben with a soft smile of his own. We'll get to the basics of how to effectively use your mana tomorrow. Said Gwen. Thanks again, Gwen. For everything. Said Ben sincerely. Don't mention it. Said Gwen with a warm smile. Good night, doofus. Teased Gwen with a smile. Good night, dweeb. Teased Ben with a smile of his own, and with that, he placed his left index finger on the faceplate of the plumber's badge, thus ending the transmission. Lying down properly on his bed, Ben looked up with a smile on his face, satisfied with the outcome of his discussion with Gwen. He would remain occupied with his thoughts for the next few minutes, before being brought out of his trance by a set of footsteps belonging to Yuji. Itadori back so soon? Asked Ben with a smile as the younger teen entered inside the room with a tired look in his eyes and his right hand at the back of his head. Pretty sure I've been gone for more than an hour. said Yuji as he scratched the back of his head lightly. Oh yeah. Guess I kinda lost track of time, admitted Ben with a hint of embarrassment. You were talking with your cousin again, right? Asked Yuji. Yeah, I was. We were catching ourselves up on how our respective days went, said Ben as he looked at Yuji begin to climb up to the top bunk. Oh. How did hers go? Asked Yuji as he had reached the top bunk, and only needed to lie on it. Same as always, said Ben casually. That's a good thing though, said Yuji, now lying down as well. Yeah, I guess you're right, said Ben in a not too convincing tone. One that Yuji picked up despite his fatigue. You're still worried that one of your bad guys may be planning something sinister in the shadows, and that they might not be able to handle it? Asked Yuji with concern. More or less, admitted Ben. But they have powers too, right? Asked Yuji. They do, but some of the villains we've fought are really strong. Some so strong that I really can't see my friends and family coming out on top if they had to fight them without me, reasoned Ben. I think you should have more faith in them, said Yuji, causing Ben's eyes to briefly widen in confusion. You said it yourself. You've only beaten a lot of your enemies because they helped you however they could, no matter how small, said Yuji, elaborating further on his point. And that's exactly why I'm worried for them. Neither of us have beaten our baddies that much solely on our own. And even then, I'm the one who's done so the most, countered Ben. It's not that I don't believe in them. It's just that, began Ben with a bit of hesitation. I don't want them to get hurt or worse because of one of my baddies. Because more often than not, it's me and the omnitrix that they're after. My loved ones just end up being caught in the crossfire. The sadness in Ben's voice was evident as it caused even Yuji's ever-shutting eyes to gain a bit of sharpness due to sympathy. I understand where you're coming from, I also believe you should give them the benefit of a doubt, said Yuji with understanding, but without backing down on his own belief of the subject matter. They've fought these foes for as long as you have, and more importantly, they know how much they mean to you, and you also mean a lot to them. I'm sure they wouldn't put themselves in a situation more than they could handle, reasoned Yuji. But if they did, I want to promise you that if you still have difficulties going back home to them, I at the very least, would like to help you however I could. Though there was one notable flaw in Yuji's reasoning, the fact that neither Ben or his loved ones actually existed in this reality, and that neither Yuji or any of their aforementioned allies would have any means to go to Ben's reality. Despite Yuji not knowing this, his intentions behind those were what mattered to Ben. And Ben's respect for him would only continue to grow as a result. Thanks, Itadori, said Ben with gratitude. Though I hope it doesn't have to come to that, you're right. I'm sure they can handle whatever comes their way. A small smile formed on Yuji's face, content that he was able to change the perspective of his new friend for the better. Glad to hear that you've changed your mind, said Yuji as he let out a yawn. You're already tired, noted Ben with a bemused smile. Yeah. Need to sleep, said Yuji as he began to hold on tightly to his pillow and his eyes completely shut. We'll talk more tomorrow, said Yuji, a few seconds away from sleep. Yeah. Good night, Itadori, said Ben as he got more comfortable in his bed. Good night, Tennyson, said Yuji with a content smile as he drifted into a peaceful slumber. Resting his head back on his pillow, a smile would also form on Ben's face, as he was overall content with how the day came to a close. And with that in mind, he too eventually welcomed a much-needed rest. The next morning would prove to be quite an eventful one. Not as much as the past day, but still satisfactory. It saw Ben telling Yuji more of his discussion with Gwen, and her willingness to teach Ben to better use his powers. Yuji was happy for Ben, and wished him success in his upcoming training. The two continued with their normal training for most of the day, with Yuji better enhancing his cursed energy output into objects, and Ben becoming more efficient in switching from his cursed energy to mana. Then the afternoon came, and with it, began Ben's training with Gwen per her request to slate it at that time. An activity that Ben had opted be done in the same park Satoru had brought him to yesterday. They started with Ben learning to draw on more of his mana. The reason being that since his mana was just recently awakened, his actual control of it would be less than desirable. So learning how to draw from it at moderate quantities would be ideal. The way they went about it, flat shield-like constructs. A trademark used by Gwen in situations that mostly required defense. Since she couldn't physically be there with him, her holographic projection could only call out Ben whenever he made a mistake, and acknowledge him when he got an instruction right. Though his efforts were admirable, their results weren't ideal for the omnitrix bearer. Each time it seemed like he was about to draw out his mana further, the aura surrounding his hands would instantly disappear. Thankfully, Gwen was very understanding and supportive, sharing that she too had struggles effectively utilizing her mana, and that it took her month to reach a somewhere satisfactory level, and even then, she always believed that there was room for improvement. Ben was somewhat surprised by this, as although he knew that Gwen worked hard to mstr her powers, he didn't fully expect it to have demanded that much effort from her, especially since she made it look very easy whenever she used them. Undeterred as he knew that his cousin's backing of his efforts were absolute, Ben continued his series of trial and error in manifesting his mana in a shield-like construct. This would last for hours, thus leading to nightfall. Though their objective wasn't reached, Gwen saw Ben's efforts as admirable and satisfactory, and suggested that they call it a day, and continue tomorrow. Ben insisted that he was getting it, and that Gwen a bit more patience. She reluctantly agreed, and watched on as Ben continued to struggle for the next few minutes. Just as she began to suggest that they close for the day, to both of their surprises, Ben successfully manifested a small but flat mana construct. To ensure that it wasn't a fluke, he attempted to do so again several times, and was successful with each attempt. Proud of her cousin for his current achievement, Gwen relayed on to Ben his due praise, and that they would continue with same mana shield projection tomorrow, to which Ben looked forward to. The next day came, and just like last time, during the afternoon, Ben and Gwen continued with their training. Since Ben was able to do a mana shield construct the past day numerous times, Gwen encouraged him to be more creative with the shape of his constructs, to which Ben happily obliged. He was able to make spherical, triangle and star-like constructs. Though doing each one overwhelmed him with a great deal of exhaustion. As a result, they put a close to their training before sunset, but were very satisfied nonetheless. And none was more happy than Gwen. To Ben's surprise, Gwen had more difficulty with this training when her effectiveness with her powers were still in its infancy. Seeing that Ben was able to make more progress than she did in a short time not only confirmed that her mastery and understanding of mana, and her ability to share that as information was at an elite level, but that Ben himself had great potential to be a MSTR in his own right. Though it would take him a long time before he could even come close to Gwen's level, a fact that she let be known to which Ben had no qualms with, as he already held Gwen's mastery of mana in high regard. It didn't mean that he couldn't work up to a level that would earn him reverence. Due to his progress however, Ben was able to move further ahead into another form of training, mana projectiles. Disc-like objects made purely out of mana that can be used offensively. A technique used often by Gwen during combat, and as a result, gave Ben the impression that it would be easier to learn. Oh, how wrong he was. The next few days saw Ben attempting, and failing to manifest even one mana projectile. It wasn't for a lack of trying from Ben's part or from a lack of proper guidance from Gwen's part. Rather, the means in which the mana projectiles was far more complex than Ben could have anticipated. According to Gwen, to achieve this feat, Ben needed to draw out a moderate amount of his mana at the beginning, then increase his output to near maximum somewhere in the middle, then launch the projectile with an even lower mana output than when he began to draw from it. The mechanics of it sounded far easier in theory than in practice, as each time Ben attempted this, his mana was always in a constant flux, not giving him a clear idea of which part of the mechanics he was falling short at. Wishing not to undermine his current progress up to this point, Gwen suggested that Ben continue to work on his mana shield constructs, and only attempt the mana discs at his leisure. It was a feat that even she struggled greatly with, and as such, was very understanding of Ben's shortcomings, but didn't treat them as such, choosing to rather commend his achievements so far. Though he initially intended to follow through with Gwen's advice, Ben couldn't help but feel the need to give his mana projectile training the same amount of time, if not more, than his mana shield constructs training. The reason being that he felt that he would be successful, if he just gave it enough attention to properly find out what he was doing wrong. Which leads us to present day. A loud sigh of exasperation escaped from Ben's lips as his self-reflection had only proven to him that his current efforts bore no merits, and that's perhaps his approach to it needed to change. He then sported a smirk as he remembered that Yuji and Gwen had exercised their concerns of Ben going too far with his training, and that he should perhaps take a break. Though he initially dismissed their concerns, as he had faith that his efforts wouldn't be vain, he began to ponder on whether a change of heart would be more beneficial to him. Cupping his left hand underneath his chin, Ben looked up to the full moon and his eyes remained glued to it for the next few minutes. A snicker would escape his lips, which in turn would turn into a smirk. His mind was already made up. Guess I'll take their advice after all. Ben's teeth shone as he held a beaming smile. The next morning came, and it would seem that the activities of the residents of the basement would remain unchanged. Satoru absent as he went on either a task assigned to him by Jujutsu Tech, a quest to satisfy his own desires, or a mix of both. Yuji was in a room that seemed mostly empty, with a foot mat, a few wooden chairs and tables adorned across different corners of the room. Though he wore his green hoodie, his legwear consisted of a grey joggers, and he was completely barefoot. He stood in the middle of the room with his hands on his waist, and looked like he was expecting someone. I wonder where Tennyson is, pondered Yuji. Hopefully, he's not out training early again. Aside from possibly overworking himself, it'd be kind of rude if he blew me off like that without telling me he wouldn't be present, said Yuji with a frown as he recollected how the Ultimatrix bearer usually left him without a sparring partner, and made him resort to sparring with Satoru whenever he was available. A less than pleasant experience. It seemed that fate had other plans in store as soon enough, Ben would enter inside the room with his usual attire, and a smile on his face. Hey Itadori, greeted Ben. Hey, Tennyson, greeted Yuji with a bit more enthusiasm as he was glad that Ben was finally present. Sorry I was late. I was looking for my favorite jacket, said Ben with a hint of embarrassment. Isn't it your only jacket? Asked a confused Yuji. All the more reason why it's my favorite. I kinda misplaced it by accident, said Ben with a bit more boldness. It's alright. As long as you're here for our spar, assured Yuji with a light chuckle. Yeah, about that, began Ben a bit sheepishly, immediately alarming Yuji, as he feared that the worst-case scenario was about to unfold. Oh no you don't, said Yuji as he placed his right hand on Ben's left shoulder firmly. Huh? Asked a confused Ben. I'm not letting you leave. You're only going to go out to there to try and learn the technique your cousin said you should give a rest for now. Then you're going to come back tired and take a nap. Only to go back outside and continue with your training, said Yuji, annoyed at the prospect of Ben abandoning him again. I don't think I have to say why that's wrong, said Yuji as he proceeded to cross his arms. No you don't, because you're completely right. It's not cool, said Ben with understanding. Good, said Yuji with a satisfied smile. Which is exactly why that's not what I'm going out to do, said Ben with a smile of his own. Huh? Said a confused Yuji as he dropped his hands. I'm taking your advice and Gwen's by taking a bit of a break. Thought the best way I'd do that is by going to Jujutsu Tech, said Ben. Isn't that counterproductive? Questioned Yuji. On the contrary, no, countered Ben. It's been a while since I last saw Fushiguro or Kujisaki, so I might as well pay them a visit and find out how they've been doing, Ben reasoned. Began Yuji in thought as he cupped his right hand under his chin. It does sound like you're going there to take things easy a bit. Though I can't help but wonder if you're just saying this to trick me, and train with them instead. Said Yuji with apparent suspicion. I'm not going to that. Scout's honor. Said Ben as he placed his left hand on his chest and raised up his right hand, along with a broad smile. I would have stayed here, but you also need to focus on your training, and I don't want to get in the way of that. Said Ben as he dropped both hands. Plus I would have been more likely to go back to my training if I did, and we don't want that now, do we? Ben added, causing Yuji to drop his right hand. True. Said Yuji with a chuckle. Alright, Tennyson. Guess I'll see you later, said Yuji as he held out his right hand. Yeah, see ya. Said Ben as he accepted Yuji's proposal and shook his hand with his left. Say hi to Fushiguro and Kujisaki for me. Said Yuji as Ben began to walk out of the door. You know, I'm pretty sure they'll be wondering why you couldn't tell them yourself. Said Ben with a light snicker. Heh heh. You've got a point there. Said Yuji sheepishly. Though they can understand why I couldn't come due to my training. Reasoned Yuji. Yeah, I'm sure they will. Though you should make an effort to visit them before the festival. Said Ben with a chuckle. Yeah, you're right. Maybe when next you go there, I'll tag along. Suggested Yuji. It's a deal then. Said Ben in approval. I'm off. Said Ben as he waved back at Yuji. Good luck with your training, Itadori. Said Ben as he was now at the exit of the room. Thanks. Hope you have a good time. Said Yuji with a wave of his own. I'll make sure I do. Said Ben before leaving. As he walked towards the sitting room of the basement, he held up his left hand, before pushing back its sleeve, revealing the omnitrix. With a smirk, he activated the device and slammed it down, causing the familiar green light to wash all over him. Big chill. Shouted the Necrophrygian as he stood in the place of Ben once the light died down. Unfolding his wings, Big Chill then became intangible before flying through the ceiling, thus ending up right outside the basement, and at the outdoors. Increasing his flight speed, Big Chill ascended higher into the air until he was several hundred feet off the ground. So much so that he could see both the building he and Yuji resided in and numerous other buildings as well. See. Content, Big Chill then flew forward instead, still remaining intangible, and heading towards Jujutsu Tech. The golden rays of the glorious sunshine set down a sense of warmth and comfort as the residents of Sendai City went on with their daily activities. Even amongst those who had a predisposed disposition that today wouldn't amount to much, some of them dared to hope that perhaps today would bring with it worthwhile merits. And for those who were greatly pessimistic, they dared to hope that perhaps today would be slightly more tolerable than the last. But for our young hero, Ben10, he dared to hope that today would be far greater than the last. And nothing highlighted his optimism better than the joy he took with performing complex maneuvers as Big Chill across the sky. Though eager to reach Jujutsu Tech as soon as possible, Big Chill didn't let that deter him from taking joy in maintaining his slow flight speed across the skies. The reason being that this had been the first time in days since Ben had used the Ultimatrix, and he always found flying to be one of his greatest delights with his powers. Using Big Chill over Jetray, his fastest transformation, also came with its merits. Due to Big Chill's intangibility, he could blend with the sky and clouds, and go to his destination almost unnoticed. Even when there were a few civilians who looked up and noticed his slightly transparent silhouette, they would brush it off as nothing, and go on with their activities. After spending a few minutes of flight, Big Chill, upon reaching his destination, would descend downwards while still maintaining his intangibility. Now hovering directly above the entrance, Big Chill would land in front of it and become visible again. Upon folding his wings back into a cloak, a bright flash of green would engulf Big Chill, and once it died down, Ben would stand in his place. With a smile on his face, Ben would walk into the compound, while occasionally looking from side to side in case anyone was nearby. After a few moments of walking, Ben stood at the entrance of the hut where Masamichi normally resided. Looks like no one's around. I might have to look deeper inside the campus. Noted Ben with his left finger cupped under his chin briefly. Dropping his hand in order to put it in his pockets, Ben would leave the hut with a smile on his face. And I think I know just where to look. The setting was a forest with stone statues designed in the form of lanterns placed from side to side. On the road where the statues were placed opposite of were 3 individuals. 2 whom were instantly recognizable. The first, Megumi, wore a tracksuit jacket zipped up in the middle. It was mostly black, including the pants, with only the top half of his chest and the entirety of his back being blue. The second, Nobara, wore a tracksuit as well. Hers being a white hoodie also zipped up in the middle, with a horizontal black design placed across her chest to her back. The design was adorned with white flowers, and just like Megumi, her pants were black. The third, a girl, who was around Nobara's height, thus making her shorter than had a tall athletic build, along with small golden eyes and dark green hair which was tied into a short ponytail. She had fringes of hair over her forehead with smaller strands framing her cheeks and used to sport a pair of dark pink glasses. She also wore a purple tracksuit with tan shorts over her leggings. She also held causally a brown bow staff with her right hand, even placing it atop her right shoulder. Is she one of the students? Thought Ben to himself as he stood behind a tree which was a few feet away from the trio who seemed to be in a deep discussion. I've never seen her before. Though to be fair, I haven't seen any other student outside Fushiguro. A small smile formed on Ben's lips with that recollection. I'm guessing she's a senior, but I can't help but wonder if Fushiguro's ever mentioned her. Ben would look up as he began to recollect past conversations with Megumi, so as to ascertain whether the girl that stood a few feet away from him had ever been mentioned. Well, I'm not going to get any answers here. If I ever had to meet any of the second years or higher, I'm guessing now is a good time. Concluded Ben before coming out from behind the tree and walking towards the trio. Yo! Fushiguro, Kojosaki. Greeted Ben, causing the 3 teens to look at his direction. How's it going? Asked Ben with a smile. Tennyson? Asked a surprised Megumi as his eyes were widened. The green-haired girl looked at Megumi as he said Ben's name before looking back at Ben. What are you doing here? Asked an equally surprised Nobara. Just thought I'd drop by and say hello. It's been a while since we've seen each other after all. Said Ben with a shrug. And it's nice to meet you too, said Ben as he looked towards the green-haired girl. Zenin Maki. But you can call me Maki. Greeted Maki formally. Zenin senpai. Muttered Ben as his eyes widened upon saying the last sentence, as a revelation had just dawned on him. You must have been the girl Fushiguro was talking about. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Tennyson Ben. But you can call me Ben if you want. Said Ben slightly more ecstatic as his smile slightly widened. So I've heard. Fushiguro has told me quite a lot about you. Said Maki as she eyed Ben curiously. Her expression was subtle, so Ben couldn't tell when she looked at him from head to toe. Though he would try the same thing, but wouldn't achieve the same success as Maki would notice almost immediately. Despite that, she didn't seem to mind it. All good things I hope. Said Ben with a sly smirk. He mentioned an air of mystery surrounding your background, and a stubbornness that stems from either naivety or moral obligation. Or a mix of both. Pondered Maki in a manner that suggested that it was addressed more towards herself than Ben. Is that right? Asked Ben somewhat nervously. His eyes then turned towards Megumi, who immediately avoided his gaze. Great, her first impression of me isn't exactly a positive one. Thought Ben with a small frown. Why are you here, Tennyson? I thought you and Itadori would be training with Gojo-sensei for the foreseeable future. Said Megumi as he managed to re-establish eye contact with Ben. Oh, we still are. I just decided to take a break to pay you guys a visit. Said Ben. Sounds like slacking off to me. Said Nobara as she crossed her arms and eyed Ben suspiciously. Trust me, it isn't. Besides, both Itadori and Gojo are cool with it. Assured Ben. Oh. Said Nobara as she raised a single eyebrow due to curiosity. How is that? Asked Megumi, who maintained his calm and collected demeanor alongside Maki. It's a bit of a long story, which brings me back to you. Said Ben as he turned his direction back to Maki. Zenin-san, I mean Maki. Stuttered Ben slightly. I'd like to talk to both of them in private for a bit, if that's okay with you. Said Ben with a smile. There's no problem at well. I had already asked Fushiguro to run an errand for me, and Kojosaki was just about to accompany him. Said Maki casually. Since you're here, you might as well tag along. Maki then turned to face both Megumi and Nobara. My thoughts exactly. Said Ben in agreement. So, began Ben. You guys ready? Megumi wouldn't verbally respond, but his demeanor did show that he would display no opposition to Ben's proposal. I guess. But I have to wonder. What's so important that you had to come all the way down here? Asked Nobara. I'll tell you along the way. Assured Ben as he walked ahead of the trio before standing directly in front of them by a few feet away. Oh, and it was nice meeting you, Maki. Said Ben as he turned back to wave at her. Both Megumi and Nobara would walk towards Ben. Likewise. Said Maki with a nod. She seems pretty alright. Said Ben as he began to walk alongside Megumi and Nobara, standing in the middle. Megumi stood at his left and Nobara stood at his right. Feel the same way. I can't exactly place it, but I just have a good feeling about her. Said Nobara, sporting a small smile as well. Heh, I can relate to that. And if it's coming from your gut, I say follow it. Advised Ben, catching Nobara by surprise, thus leaving her unable to form an immediate response. Now, back to the subject matter. Let's say we put that on hold for a bit and talk about something more important. Said Ben. Being? Asked Megumi. How have you guys been? We've barely seen each other for a week, and we haven't exactly been the best at keeping touch. Said Ben with a light chuckle. It was evident that neither of expected to head their conversation in that direction, as Megumi had briefly opened his mouth wide, but was unable to reply immediately. We've been fine, but mostly busy. Megumi would eventually say. Preparing for the upcoming festival. Completely understandable, since Itadori and I have been doing the same thing. Said Ben. How's your training been going? Megumi's eyes narrowed slightly, as he contemplated lightly what would be the best answer to Ben's question. I've been making some progress on getting the most out of my cursed technique. It hasn't been a rapid or instantaneous progression, but I'd say it's been significant, and gradually shaping up to be more. Said Megumi with confidence. That's great. And don't worry about it. Progress is progress after all, no matter how small. Said Ben with pride, causing an initially surprised Megumi to form a small smile on his face. And what about you, Kojosaki? Asked Ben. Me? Aside from getting to know our seniors, I wouldn't say I've done much. Said Nobara with a mild shrug. I mean, I've certainly been training, but I feel like I've learning more about how it feels to be a punching bag than anything new. Nobara would form a pout along with a frown, as if she was recollecting an unpleasant memory. Oh, wow. Said a dumbfounded Ben. Didn't expect that at all. Nobara would look at Ben with suspicion. What's that supposed to mean? Her question made Ben to flinch almost immediately. Nothing. I'm just surprised, that's all. You've got nothing to worry about. Heh. Said Ben as he treaded his words carefully, in hopes of not incurring Nobara's wrath. Though she still eyed him with suspicion, she didn't speak out when Ben would not so subtly lean towards Megumi to whisper into his ear. Fushiguro? You mind telling me exactly what happened? Asked Ben in a whisper. She's been training in close quarters combat with Panda Senpai and Inumaki Senpai. They believe her current skill level, though impressive, could be better. Megumi however, would be not subtle, as he answered audibly enough that Nobara would hear him. JRK, said Nobara with a frown. So that's what she meant, thought Ben with his eyes slightly widened in realization. I've got to be careful with her. If what Itadori told me about her is true, she can get mad pretty fast. Which is something I'd like to avoid. During one of their conversations, Yuji would recount to Ben his experience with Nobara when they both exorcised the Roppongi curse. Citing her short-tempered and prone to lash out with aggression when angered, Yuji advised Ben to always ensure that he never be the focus of her rage. An advice that Ben had no problem following. As experiences with his cousin, Gwen, had enlightened him that the saying, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," was indeed factual. And with those experiences came another lesson, that no matter how powerful he could be, women could always find a way to harm him. Don't be too HRD on yourself, Nobara. No one expects you to do perfectly on your first try, encouraged Ben. Besides, the fact that you've got skills on your own is pretty impressive. You've just gotta keep building on that. Both Megumi and Nobara were visibly taken aback by Ben's statement. I can't even mention how many times I've messed up before I finally learnt what I was doing wrong. A snicker would escape Ben's lips as he remembered times when he would struggle to control his alien powers, or to adhere to lessons that had been taught to him. All struggles which he faced when he was 10, but still faced even in his teens. Why are you so nice? Asked Nobara with a frown, shocking Ben and Megumi so greatly that they both nearly stopped walking. Excuse me? Asked Ben. Trying to lift make Fushiguro and I feel better about ourselves. I may not have known him for more than a few days, or you for that matter, but it definitely feels like something Itadori would do as well. The reason being Nobara's suspicion of Ben's activities was that she wasn't completely certain that he was as kind-hearted as others and himself had made him out to be. A notion that she once held with Yuji before he would aid her in exorcising the Roppongi curse, thus proving her wrong. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 6. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Shinobi360 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.